Hello, it's Claudio, and in this video I will explain you the concept of list in Python. Imagine you have different values, for example numbers or strings, and you want to group them together. Python lists allow you to do that and provide methods and functions for adding elements, removing elements, and a lot more. In Python, you assign the value to a variable using the equal sign. For example, here is how I assign the value 1 to the variable number. And if I want to print the value of the variable number, I can use the print statement. As you can see here, this is the number 1 I'm printing in a terminal. So what's the difference between this variable, the variable number, and a variable of type list? A variable of type list contains multiple values. So let's see how we can define a list in Python. In this example, I want to create a list that contains the first 5 numbers of the Fibonacci sequence. To define a list in Python, we use the square brackets. So as you can see, I have defined a list in Python using square brackets, and every element is separated by the next one using a comma. As you can see here, my IDE is giving me an error. In this case, as an IDE, I'm using PyCharm. Let's have a look what the error is about. So the error is complaining about a missing white space after each comma. So let's add that. And as usual, if I want to print the value of the variable, I can use the print statement. And here you can see the list printed in the terminal. An index is used to access each element of the list, and the value of the index starts from 0. The highest value of the index is the number of elements in the list minus 1. So in this specific case, the first index for the first element is 0, and the last index is 4. So you will have index 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So let's see how I can print the first element of the Fibonacci list using the index 0. I will pass the index between square brackets. And if I run the command, I can see 1, that is the first element in the list. Now let's try with the last element. As you can see, here I have the number 8, that is the last element of the list. What happens if I pass 5 as an index? I get the following error: list index out of range, because the value of the index in a list goes from 0 to the number of items in the list minus 1. So in this case, 5 minus 1 is 4. In Python, we can also use the colon character to print part of a list. This is called slicing. For example, if I want to print the first 3 elements of our list, I can use colon 3. And here I can see the first 3 elements. And to print the last 2 elements, I will use 3 colon. As you can see, as a result, I have the number 5 and 8 that are the last 2 elements in the list. In Python, you can also use negative indexes. For example, to print the last element of a list, I can use the index -1. And if I want to print the element before the last, I can use -2. Another example of list could contain only strings. For example, let's define a list called animals. So far, we have seen two lists, one that contains only numbers and one that contains only strings. Python's flexibility allows you to create a list that is a mix of numbers and strings, like the one below. In the list elements, we have one string, tiger, one integer number, 8, and one float number, 0.5. This is very cool because it's something that is not possible in other programming languages. So let's see what else Python allows us to do. For example, I want to create a list that contains the 3 lists that we have created so far. So I can define a new list as a list that contains the Fibonacci list as first element, the animals list as second element, and the elements list as third element. So here you can see the list that we have created, where the first element is the Fibonacci list, the second element is the animals list, and the third element is the elements list. So you basically have lists within a list. A list in Python is mutable. This means that you can apply different operations to it. For example, you can add elements or remove elements. Let's say I want to add another number to the Fibonacci list. I can use the append method to do that. To use the append method, I will type the name of the variable, Fibonacci, followed by a dot, followed by the name of the method I want to apply, in this case append. And then I can append the next number of the Fibonacci sequence. As you can see, I have now added another number to the original Fibonacci sequence. Another useful method is remove, that allows to remove an element from the list based on its value. For example, I want to remove the number 3. And if we run the command, you can see that the number 3 is not present in the list anymore. Now let's try to remove the number 3 again. Let's see what happens. This time we get back an error that says that the number 3 cannot be removed because it's not in the list. So what if I want to remove an element from the list based on its index? To do that, I need to use the pop method. For example, if I want to remove the element at index 1, so the number 2, I will use the following command. As you can see, the number 2 has now disappeared from the list. And do you know what happens if you execute the pop method without any index? Give it a try and let me know what you see. Now let's go back to our original Fibonacci sequence. Before we have seen how to add the number 13 to the list. Now let's say I want to add the next 3 elements to the Fibonacci sequence. How do I do that? I can use the Extend method. The Extend method allows you to extend the existing list with another list. Once again, I will use the dot notation. So Fibonacci dot extend. As you can see, PyCharm here is also suggesting the methods available. So it's very useful if you don't know everything about the syntax of a method or function you want to use. So in this case, extend takes an array, and the elements I want to add are 13, 21, and 34. And if we print the list, we can now see the new values added to the initial list. We will complete this tutorial with the Len function that is very often used in Python. The Len function is used to get the number of elements in a list. For example, if we take the current Fibonacci sequence, you can see that it has 8 elements. Let's confirm that using the Len function. So you will type len and then open brackets and have the Fibonacci variable between the brackets. And the result is 8. Other usable functions are min, max, and sum. So let's copy this line and also print the min that calculates the smallest element in the list, max that calculates the largest element in the list, and sum that calculates the sum of the elements in the list. So 1 is the min, the max is 34, and the sum is 87. Also, another common scenario when using lists is to calculate the sorted version of a numeric list. To do that, Python provides the sort method. For example, let's define a numeric list whose elements are not sorted. Here is the output of the sort method. We are now at the end of this tutorial. In this tutorial, you have learned the basics about lists in Python. You now know how to define a list of integers, strings, and mixed types, print part of a list, add one or more elements to a list, remove elements from a list, calculate the number of elements in a list, get the smallest element, the largest element, and the sum of the elements in a list, and finally sort the elements of a list. I hope it makes sense. And if you have any questions, please write them in the comments below. Also, hit the subscribe button if you want to learn more about Python and you want to be notified when I record a new video about programming in Python. Thank you and see you in the next video.